Welcome, everybody, to Transforming the Vagus Nerve from an integrative mind, energy, body, spirit orientation. I'm really excited to finally do this webinar. The vagus nerve has been big in the the popular world, meaning the popular psychotherapy world and people who work with trauma and chronic illness. Um, Steve Dr. Stephen Porges is the one that popularized the vagus nerve in my world. He is author of polyvagal theory, and he and his wife have done extensive research documenting how important the vagus nerve is in terms of creating health and connection with yourself and connection with others. It is the nerve of safety. If you don't feel safe, it becomes dysregulated. And it can actually, if you can look at this picture here, it goes through all the main organs, through the facial muscles. And if it gets dysregulated, it affects your state of being and it affects your health. So I'm excited about understanding how the vagus nerve can be regulated from that integrative mind, energy, body, spirit perspective. Um, and a lot of this is learning also how to transform stress, the stress of not feeling safe, and transforming that into wisdom, wholeness, power, and positive manifestation. All right, guys, you up for this? Let's get started. So first, a little bit about me. If you're new to my webinars, my name is Carolyn Busey-Eberly. I'm a licensed professional counselor, but I've also done a lot of different things. I've traveled the world studying spiritual awakening, meditation, energy healing. I've written the book in the upper right-hand corner. It's Explorer's Mind, A Map to Freedom, available on Amazon. I was a teacher trainee at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. I used to be a Washington, D.C. lobbyist trying to advocate for the underprivileged, and I was working the macro. And then I moved overseas and started studying natural healing and started honestly trying to heal myself from my own developmental trauma and my own dysregulation of my vagus nerve. In my life. And in that process, I started working on the micro, working on helping individuals. And gradually, I now teach groups. And yeah, I'm looking forward to teaching you today in this webinar. I used to be a massage therapist. I've studied a lot of body-centered psychotherapy, done a lot of different things. I also use horses and my animals in my healing work. Let's get started. I put this cartoon up of Charlie Brown saying my anxieties have anxieties. And so that's a great thing to dysregulate the vagus nerve. I've recently done a video and a blog article on how anxiety can hold you back. And so statistically speaking, anxiety is kind of an epidemic in the United States these days. So I'm going to touch a little bit on how the vagus nerve, anxiety and trauma, and your attachment system interplay together, and how they can help each other and how they can really sabotage each other and the relationship between them all. So what will we do today? We'll talk more about why the vagus nerve is so important. And again, clinical diagnoses of anxiety disorders and stress that lead to that vagus nerve dysregulation. And this is a topic really close to my heart. In the work I teach, we have a true self, which I call the core being, and a false self, which is more based on our attachment system, which I'll explain what that means in a bit. Our attachment system, how our brain and body and nervous system are wired to create a false self, a self that is part of the illusion of who you think you are. The the false self has a lot of your personal distortions and is reactive to how your brain and body systems work and how your energy system works. It's the illusion that isn't the deeper truth of that essence of you connecting to source, of being in contact with that bigger essence of who you are, that core being. And that false self really can sabotage the working of the vagus nerve, does interact and is formed by your attachment system and by trauma and by your false beliefs. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that and how to heal and shift that. And really therapeutic methods that transform the vagus nerve. I'll give you a demo of a hands-on method as well as non-touch integrative methods. And everything's done through the subtle energy field, through conscious mindfulness, through somatically, through the body. All three systems, mind, energy, and body, together into one. Which means that we have to open to that quantum reality of everything's made out of particles of energy, and we'll cover that. And how leading out any one of the three systems, mind, energy, or body, can get in the way of transforming anxiety in the vagus nerve. So please be open as a Zen bowl to new ideas and concepts. This is a picture that a student drew of me before she met me, of her teacher. And it's got that light coming in of who we really are in the darkness. So the vagus nerve energetically is dysregulated by the darkness within and around, and how as we connect to the light of who we are, it self-regulates. And it is about connection. We're all connected. We're so connected that she drew that picture of me before she even saw me as a kid. That's me as a kid. And I always show this in the beginning of my webinars. And if you've seen this before, I'm sorry, we're doing it again, because I want us to start out with the foundation that we're all one, that we're all connected, and we're here to help and support each other. In the current political environment, it seems like we need to be tribal and be separate, one tribe against the other. And that's not going to create regulation of the vagus nerve and manifestation of the world's highest good. So if you regulate your vagus nerve, imagine that resonance, that separate tribal but more cooperative behavior can spread out into the world. So this is the copy of Steve Porges' book, Polyvagal Theory. And I'm going to do a very simplified version of polyvagal theory because it's really complicated, and I don't think we need to understand a lot of the intricacies of it. We just need to understand some of the foundational aspects of it, of how the vagus nerve is one of the cranial nerves. It interfaces with all the organs, and there's two main aspects to it two main aspects. High dorsal tone, which is unhealthy, high vagal tone, which is healthy. And basically, when you have high vagal tone, it means the vagus nerve is really functioning at a higher level and that you feel safe within you. And isn't safety so important to the attachment system? And when trauma happens, your safety was hijacked. So just helping you understand the vagus nerve interfaces with your attachment system and with whether you have trauma and anxiety going on within you. So here's a picture of the vagus nerve. And so when you have high ventral tone, it means it's engaged. When you have high dorsal tone, which runs through the belly area, it means it's dysregulated. And when I show you the hands-on healing, one of the things you can do even right now as you're watching this, put one hand on your heart, one on your belly, and imagine just receiving love and kindness and safety until that belly starts gurgling. One of the things of the shutdown of the vagus nerve that affects chronic illness, that can promote irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, is when it doesn't allow your digestive system to really react in high efficiency. So I'll be talking a little bit about high ventral tone, and when that means it's balanced. If it has high dorsal tone, it means your digestive system and is not reacting and it's not balanced. And a quick and easy way of knowing if your vagus nerve is really activated is hearing gurgling sounds in your belly. So let's talk a little bit about what secure adult attachment means. So being insecure means you're anxious about being in relationship with somebody. You're afraid of being abandoned. You feel you're not good enough. The avoidant personality is when you kind of shut down and it doesn't feel safe to be in contact with somebody. And that can be a real drag. Disorganized is insecure attachment system, and that's more complicated. That's when there might be a personality disorder, borderline. It's when you are like, come here, no, don't come here. Come here, no, don't come here. It's kind of a combo, and it's much more complicated to really diagnose and understand the disorganized. So just kind of check inside now to see if you tend to be more anxious in a relationship or more avoidant. Do your partners complain that they want more time with you, that you're not available? Do you wait real long to return texts? And that's more avoidant. If you're anxious, you might text your partner all the time, and that's more based on insecurity, fear of abandonment. And so all three of these are about not feeling safe in relationships. So if you're not feeling safe in a relationship, your vagus nerve is going to be activated. You're going to have high dorsal tone instead of high ventral tone. Yeah, so that's a big thing. So how does our attachment system get formed? It's complicated, but just to simplify it for the purposes of this webinar, it's kind of how safe you felt by your mom as a child. Did your mom invade you? Did your mom help you feel supported? Did your mom mirror to you your positive sense of self back to you? Did you feel safe enough to be close to her, but could you wander a little bit away? And then when she came back, did you accept her and receive her again? So good, maybe in a future webinar, we'll just focus on the attachment system, because that has such a foundational effect of how your brain and body works, how your nervous system works. So what is my definition of secure attachment? It's that connection with your core being, your bigger essence. It's when you can self-identify and you can feel as a sensation and emotion in the body, your true self, that God consciousness moving through you. I call it the core being again. And then send love and healing to your human, whether your human's regulating at a more child, 7-year-old rate or teenage rate. Well, there's a differentiation between your emotional pain and your biological triggers, whether you are self-identified as your wholeness and you can track what happens to your human. Does your human freeze in fear? Do you tend to collapse? Do you shut down and numb? Do you disassociate? Do you go to anger too often? Do you feel abandoned? Do you feel disrespected? And how do you treat that human aspects, that brain and biology aspects when you get triggered? How do you deal with your triggers? Has a lot to do with whether your vagus nerve is regulated and whether you're anchored into your secure attachment. So yes, sometimes I'm in my anxious attachment. I tend to be more anxious than avoidant. You may be more avoidant. Sometimes that gets triggered. But as that happens, can you own the trigger? Can you self-identify as, oh, even though my human's not feeling safe and my ego's triggered into feeling less than or arrogant, whichever way you go, can you eventually come back into your bigger core being essence, self-identify as that, and send love and healing to your human triggers? So we're going to talk more about that. I call it the secret code, a formula, a map, 5 steps, 5 skills, 5 spiritual laws that I'll introduce to you that you can move through to self-regulate, to heal your human, and self-identify as your bigger essence, your core being. Cool? So let's go on into more of this. Other things that dysregulate your vagus nerve. Do you have general anxiety disorder? Do you have panic attacks? Are you a PTSD survivor? PTSD is now talked about in terms of whether it was like a quick event, like a car crash or a single rape, or if it's a long-term or developmental trauma where things happened over a longer period of time. Either way, it does affect your vagus nerve. It does affect your nervous system. It does affect how your brain wires. And more importantly, as I said in the beginning of this, it does create a false self. And in this discussion and in understanding the vagus nerve's dysregulation to re-regulation, to balance, it's, can you self-identify again as your true self, your core being, resonate that frequency in your mind and body, resonate that frequency in your belly, in your nervous system, in your peripheral nervous system, in your central nervous system, so it brings the vagus nerve back online. Because that's what we're really talking about. Who you feel you are in the world determines how safe you feel. And how safe you feel determines how regulated or dysregulated the vagus nerve is. Let's go on. So here's your brain. Your brain can be your friend or your enemy. So we all have a caveman brain, by the way. We have a midbrain, which is called the limbic brain, and it is triggered into dysregulation, affecting the vagus nerve when you don't feel safe, or you don't feel loved, or you feel you're going to be abandoned, or you're in your defensive reactive triggers or negative beliefs. That midbrain can really pull the vagus nerve offline. But it can also pull the vagus nerve online when you feel safe. So the caveman brain is programmed. It's got the midbrain, but it also has that primal brainstem, where a lot of the implicit and memory is, and procedural memory, meaning your habituated patterns that you don't have to think about, you just react to, are in that primal brain. And that caveman brain is searching and looking around its environment for danger. It's habituated to go to the negativity bias. Rick Hansen is the one that taught me about the negativity bias of the caveman brain. So your caveman brain is there. You have this higher brain, but when the limbic system, the midbrain, goes off, the higher brain shuts down. You basically lose your brain. I've got a cool picture that talks about this next. So the caveman brain orients toward danger, and it can bring that vagus nerve offline. It also narrows your focus to just find threats, which triggers anxiety, right? So if you determine your sense of self based on how safe it is in your environment, it's going to have more anxiety in your life and more dysregulation of your brain. But if you're self-identified as your core being and not your false self, and the core being determines your safety, again, my definition is secure attachment, you are safe when you're connected to the tingles, flows, and emotions of your true self. That regulates your nervous system, regulates the vagus nerve. I'm going to repeat myself on that topic a lot because it's so important. Yet we are pack animals, right? So if somebody in our pack is not liking us or projecting upon us or threatening us, it's like really, really difficult to feel as an emotion and sensation in the body, as an emotion of bliss, confidence, wisdom in the body, that you're safe, that you're whole, that you're not being threatened. So it's a little tricky keeping that vagus nerve balanced, keeping that, and it affects the immune system too, keeping your immune system, when the immune system is stressed because you don't feel safe. When you don't feel safe, it stresses the immune system and it can bring you offline, disconnect you from your core being and your bigger essence. So I don't want to be, pessimistic here. I want to focus on solutions to regulating, but I don't want you to also think that there isn't a lot. There's a deck of cards, biological, neurological cards, false self cards that are making the vagus nerve dysregulated. And yet we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about how to empower yourself, with the first thing being learn how to feel the emotion of bliss, of being home within you because you're connected to your true self. And learn how to self-identify as your true self and send healing and love to the human parts that do get dysregulated. And that's what creates that resilience. So understanding the brain, 3 parts of the brain, the limbic part, the higher brain, and the primal brain. Understanding that when the brain is dysregulated and when our nervous system gets activated, it can shoot cortisol levels through you, which is the stress hormone. It affects your nervous system. It affects your neurotransmitters, your dopamine, your GABA, your serotonin, your neuroepinephrine. And in this training, I'm not going to go into details about that, but I think a lot of you know that if you're on antidepressants, they're attempting to regulate an aspect of your neurotransmitter, be it a serotonin, pleasure hormone, or regulating your dopamine. It is important that our neurotransmitters stay balanced because they do affect the vagus nerve. The other thing, which is really cool, and if you haven't done this yet, you should get your heart rate variability test. It helps understand how reactive your nervous system is. Ideally, if I were to go boo, your nervous system would react and then it would downregulate right away. If you have a heart rate variability that doesn't de-stress quickly and it's kind of always activated, that makes it harder for the vagus nerve to stay balanced. My chiropractor does the heart rate variability test. You could probably Google where or what chiropractors or who has that test. It's good foundational information to understand how balanced and how easily does your nervous system downregulate. And then the other thing I want to talk about in terms of understanding the brain, and I mentioned a little bit about it, is something called procedural memory and implicit learning. There's a way that, so if I had my short-term memory cut back, like the movie 50 First Dates with Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler, if you ever saw that, where she can only remember one day. So if I had my brain shut down, so my short-term memory was only 10 minutes. Like my mom has Alzheimer's and dementia, so she has a 10-minute memory. But her implicit and procedural memory is really strong. So she can, if I put a lamp in her room and the seam of the lamp cover is facing toward her, her implicit memory is like, oh, let's straighten that out. Let's put that to the back. She could actually learn how to play piano with her implicit memory and her procedural memory, even though she only has a 10-minute short-term memory now. So how your implicit memory is programmed into you, is it programmed into you to self-identify as your false self or your true self? Because how you program your implicit and procedural memory, what trauma responses are located in your implicit and procedural memory? Do you tend to overreact or underreact to situations? Affects the vagus nerve. You really want to look at an arousal system that acts appropriately to threat, meaning if somebody is coming at you with a knife and it's not Halloween and a joke, you want to overreact. You don't want to freeze. You don't want to collapse. You want to go to fight, run, protect yourself. If it is Halloween and it is a joke, you want to stay down regulated because that helps the vagus nerve. So understanding within you what's going on with your implicit memory and your procedural memory is really key to keeping that vagus nerve balanced. I could talk about this for hours, but there are 3 opportunities that I'll give you at a discount rate to help you take this work deeper, and in-person opportunities as well as online. So please stay to the end, and I'll offer you the support to get this work at a much deeper level. Okay, so that's the example of the higher brain being shut down by freeze, by collapse, by, a trigger that makes you not think instead of react. And that downregulates, that unbalances the vagus nerve. So what are sources of vagal dysregulation? Nutrition is key. Organic structures of the brain, like we just discussed. Again, your sense of self, that false self, if your ego defines your value, it can be good if your ego is positive and is sending you love, but if you get triggered and the ego goes to a negative feeling, I'm not good enough, or looping thoughts, that dysregulates the vagus nerve. Obviously, an actual true threat, perceived internal or external threats, all dysregulate the vagus nerve. As we discussed before, your adult attachment patterns, whether you tend to be secure attachment, that connection to your core being, and you can feel it as an emotion of bliss and home in the body and tingles and flows in the body. Trauma, habitual orienting patterns, your nervous system, that heart rate variability test, does, if I said boo, does afterward and you find out it's a joke, it's Halloween, and it downregulates, or does it stay activated? And the resiliency that you have just been born from, be it past lives or be it a good life, or whatever makes you resilient, which fundamentally is knowing who you are in the world and feeling safe. So the trick with all this and the vagus nerve, fundamentally, it comes down to, can you feel emotional pain in a way that you can still feel safe. Because can you feel negative thoughts in a way that you can still feel safe? If you have nothing else to do in your life, at least learn how to feel emotional pain and negative thoughts in a way that you stay differentiated from them, individualized, and that's part of the human or the organic structures of how you've been programmed. So you can feel it, but not be it. You are your brilliant core being. It is not who you are in the world. Your human can feel all sorts of crazy making and have all sorts of crazy making thoughts, but it's not you. And then the second part of that is, how do you learn how to feel those difficult things in a way that brings that vagus nerve back online, that brings that positive sense of self, that true connection with your core being back online? Because that is self-mastery. That is freedom, and that keeps the vagus nerve regulated and balanced. Okay, there's a picture of a scared dude. Our human will go to that scared dude place, right? And that's technical. It's called the scared dude place. And I'd like to give you some really specific integrative interventions to use on yourself and others for promoting safety within you and among others. Yeah, it's a big topic. How do we feel safe in groups? How do we feel safe one-on-one? What happens when our nervous system shuts down and we go to collapse, or we go to freeze, or we project defensive anger at somebody and we lose ourselves? So let's talk about that. And first, I want to talk about it from that quantum reality level, that everything's made out of particles of energy. The truth is, when we feel rejected, when we feel unsafe, our higher brain, like that picture, it gets hijacked, and we feel what's happening in the moment is true. Part of your implicit learning, that procedural memory we talked about. Yet, as you develop the skills, I teach 5 steps, 5 skills, and 5 spiritual laws to help you, that map. As you learn how to stay connected to that core being, that true self, and heal your human, you can move out of that Newtonian reality where everything's solid and fixed and into the formless, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, of that quantum energy. Because everything has low vibrational particles of energy, that whole consciousness of joy, of sadness and anxiety and unsafety, and high vibrational consciousness of joy and core being and wisdom and bliss and play and, positive sensations and all that brilliant stuff. So learning how to move, and even having the concept in the brain that what you're feeling and thinking right now isn't necessarily true. There is a bigger you that can come in. And let's talk more about that. So this is the video I do just about every webinar, because I think it explains subtle energy a lot. So unsafety is the black paint. And it's the false self, it's the dysregulation, the biology, the negative ego. But if you have enough white paint or connection to your core being, wisdom, high vibrational consciousness, the black paint dissolves and everything becomes white. And so that's fundamentally what we're talking about at that quantum reality level. So remember, I said we're working all 3 mind, energy, and body systems together. Subtle energy is the foundational, the blueprint of what happens in terms of the body, in terms of the brain and the mind. So if you have black paint, low vibrational consciousness, and it's huge, you're going to be dysregulated. You're going to lose yourself. You're going to have trouble manifesting things in your life. But if you learn how to turn the black into white paint, using my 5-step skills, spiritual laws, or whatever methods you have, I mean, discount nothing. I'm providing the foundational tips to you, but you've been around a while. Use everything you know. Be connected to the power of what works for you individually. I certainly don't own all the answers. I love it when you connect to your own answers, and I'd love to hear some of your views and comments of what works for you. But fundamentally, I'd like you to have the skills to track yourself at that subtle level, subtle energy level, and that false self level, so that you can be that alchemist of transforming the lower vibrational frequencies, LVC, lower vibrational consciousness, of dysregulation of the vagus nerve, into HVC, the high vibrational consciousness of high vagal tone, of regulated vagus nerve and true self. Let's go more. So HVC, high vibrational consciousness, transforms low vibrational consciousness. If you have enough HVC. If you don't have enough HVC, you just make more black paint, or it turns gray. You know, it's not quite white. Cool. So here's an example. Barbara Brennan's second level of the auric field. So in her energies, in her human energy system. And I just want to shout out to Barbara Brennan because she's amazing. I was fortunate enough to study with her and do the teacher training at her school. I strongly recommend you join her school. She changed my life. You know, I owe so much to her and many of her amazing teachers. So here's the second level of Barbara Brennan's human energy field of your relationship to yourself. So if you have a lot of dark spots in your relationship to yourself, meaning you don't know how to love yourself, or you judge yourself unfairly, or when you make a mistake, you can't be kind to your human and help her heal and raise her vibration. You're going to have a lot of dark clouds in your second level of your energy field. And so here's an example of it transforming as you learn the steps and skills to transform that LVC black paint to white paint. Cool? Let's talk more about how to do that. Regulating your chakra system. You have chakras front and back, and they're supposed to spin toward the left shoulder in front and toward the right shoulder in back. Kind of like, you know, front and back together is like a corkscrew or wringing out a towel. So spinning your chakras is one way of helping balance the vagus nerve. Feeling the negative false self that's held in any part of the chakra system and transforming it. The safety chakra, you know, feeling safe on earth is the first chakra. Learning how to balance your first chakra is really key in terms of regulating the vagus nerve. And again, here's my 5-step process on how to do it. Step 1, spiritual law 1 that I teach, is your sense of self creates your reality. So if you're connected to your wounded self, your false self, you're going to create a lower vibrational reality. So step 1 of the 5 steps is awareness of whether you're in your wholeness or your wound. And the skill to implement that is the explorer's mind, that objective observer saying, am I in my wholeness or not? Step 2, spiritual law 2 of my system is you are not your emotional pain. Those looping thoughts and negative beliefs are just energy. Skill 2 is, you know, be detached, individualized, and differentiated from the negative thoughts and emotions that are held in your mind or your brain and body. And Barbara Brennan calls it the heart line. It's real magnetic energy that runs from heaven to earth through the center of the body. I call it the intention line. And I'll show you a video of the intention line. As you learn how to resonate this energy through your body and reconnect it, gives you some space to differentiate and individualize from the emotional pain, which regulates the vagus nerve. It's a more yang energy, or yang as I used to call it, energy than the more yin feminine type energy. It's very strong, and it helps you activate. I can say no. I can have my own back. I know I'm whole. I know I'm not my false self. These are all real big things for regulating the vagus nerve. 3, your negative past repeats. Spiritual Law 3 says your negative past repeats until you change that false self, those negative patterns, that implicit learning, that procedural memory in your brain and body systems. Remember, it's all 3 systems: mind, energy, and body. So I ask you to name, own, and claim where the distortion is held, what chakra, where in your body, somatically, and then choose to lean into the pain. Because if you don't go into the pain and stay differentiated, you can't change the black paint, the black paint, into white paint. It just stays there, and it even glows. Spiritual Law 4 says life happens for us, not to us. And it's our journey to find whatever gift we can get from that terrible thing that happened. And to link it to the past, to understand the construct of, is this linked to my childhood, to my attachment system and how that was formed, to past trauma. And then I ask you to call in the energy of what I call the enlightened observer. It's not objective. It's very pro you. It's pro connecting to your core being. It's bringing in tons of white paint so the black paint can transform, which brings us to step 5. Pain is the energetic portal back to wholeness. There is this true core being within you, and the skills and steps are to actually know how to let those higher frequencies, that white paint, come in and transform it. And there's many ways to do that, and we'll talk about some of the ways to transform it right now. So here's an example of trauma on the 4th level of the Brennan's auric field. Transforming, and trauma is about relationship. It's about not feeling safe or connected in healthy relationship. It can have a lot of mucus stuff there. And then it can transform using 5-step skills and spiritual laws, as you can see on this animation. And that's super cool. Yes, you can learn how to do this. And it does take time, you know. So in the anatomy of the energy field, the wound, trauma, dysregulation of the vagus nerve is located in the auric field, usually the lower levels of the auric field. I showed you level 4 just now. Before I showed you level 2, relationship to yourself. And it can be held in the chakra systems. And yet, as you connect to your core being, your bigger essence, you can self-identify as that light of who you are and help your beloved human raise his or her vibration back to the knowing of who you are in the world. And this is where the vagus nerve regulates, when you can feel the core being as a sensation of a tingle and flow, an emotion of joy, bliss, wisdom of who you really are, where you feel at home within the body because you're connected to your bigger self. Cool? Because if your energy field shrinks to the size of trauma or the negative attachment system, your vagus nerve is going to be dysregulated. You have to have a ton of white paint. Got to keep your energy system big in order to transform it. And by that, you use the mind to change the brain. Use the mind as an energetic tool. So the mind has to be resonating at the frequency of your true self. As you bring the mind into the body and it keeps that high regulation, you embody your wholeness. You embody your true self. So you have to give the mind the job of transforming the negative energy instead of thinking about it. The brain wants to think about it in that habituated neuroepinephrine negative looping pattern, and it wants to shift it instead of just letting the mind be the brain. We'll talk more about how to do that. This just talks about the research about mindfulness and how important it is to learn how to differentiate the brain's reactivity and the nervous system's reactivity from the essence of who you really are. And so one way to help bring the higher mind back online is to go through a mobilization and completion. We don't have much time, so we're gonna just touch on it briefly. Your vagus nerve gets activated, often because trauma got activated. Let's say you were a kid and you got yelled at and you shut down and you froze and you collapsed and disassociated. There's a part of your body waiting to complete and yell, stop it, stop it. And so learning how to move from that collapsed sense of self into this bigger essence of who you are is so key. Like you can hear my puppy barking in the background. Like part of me wants to shut down and, you know, Inca, stop and freeze instead of like stay in contact with you. Feel safe within me, with you, and continue forward, right? So we can all have those triggers that immobilize us, disassociate us. And we can learn how to complete what needed to happen as a child that never happened during trauma and personal challenge. So let's talk more about how to do that. One way is to connect to anger. You know, on some level, a lot of my anger is anger at myself for having frozen and not had my own back and not stood up for myself or said no, set a boundary. So learning how to work with your internal anger as well as your external anger is key to keeping the vagus nerve regulated. So in this session with this client, you know, she never stood up and said no to mom. So I'm helping her go through that mobilization technique complete and say no. Let the body, that procedural memory, that implicit learning activate to where she can say no, right? And so part of that is kind of, she could push against the wall. She can do this act, this is activating that anger to work through disassociation and collapse.
And I ask them to come on, if they have the physical ability to come on their toes, because it goes quicker if you're on your toes. And then I want you to breathe in and breathe out. And imagine you're feeling the anger and you're like, I'm powerful and you're puny.
So if it was a parent and you were really small, the parent was so big over you. I really ask people to visualize their parent shrinking. We're not sending negative energy at the parent. We're just seeing ourselves as big again. We're mobilizing from that disassociation, from that freeze, from that collapse, into feeling anger. So at that quantum level, anger transforms to personal power, to that connection of the healthy yang energy, the healthy energy of that powerful core being frequency. So if you feel yourself have that vagus nerve shut down, do some of these exercises. Breathe in, use anger, feel the power of your essence. So this is an example of Mahadev, one of my students who's now helping me teach in my program, my certification program, which I would love for you to join. It starts soon, just a little advertisement. So he's going to show you charging the anger, which isn't really about dysregulating. It's more about dysregulating the vagus nerve if you charge the anger. But sometimes you have to like mobilize and kind of release some of the anger before you can use the anger to transform to power. So the first example is of him like kind of being lost in the anger, and the second is when he's like really transforming that anger to power. You can watch. So he's like going crazy, hitting it. That's like activating the vagus nerve into dysregulation. But when he stops and he rebalances, you can then now really use anger to activate out of the freeze back into balance. And don't hit more than 10 times if you do this. You can use a rolled up yoga mat on the bed. You don't have to have this system. But if you feel yourself collapse or shut down or freeze or disassociate, using anger to help rebalance you is really powerful. So just as a review, you're learning how to balance the vagus nerve by overcoming maladaptive behaviors. So a maladaptive behavior is over-identifying with the negative emotion, shutting down, freezing, disassociating, having your attachment system's nervous system reactivity decide if you're safe instead of having that secure attachment where bringing in the higher frequencies of your core being connection to your bigger essence to determine if you're safe. I have a feeling my puppy is having a maladaptive behavior. So overcoming maladaptive behaviors, finding ways to have at least step one of the 5 steps where you learn to assess whether you're in your wholeness or in your defensive reactive behavior, your false self, your wound. That alone will tell you whether your vagus nerve is regulated to safety or not. Let's go on and talk about more. It's really important to get to a point where you can embody a system throughout your day to shift that negativity bias of the brain. Whether you use my system or you have your own, simply going to a yoga class, exercising, taking a hike, hugging your puppy, finding your ways of creating comfort and safety for your human while you self-identify as your wholeness is really vital. And I say 100 times a day, we can get dysregulated. Learning how to live from that deep knowledge that you are not the pain and shine like the whole universe is yours. So here's a hands-on demonstration, and my shout out to Aniva for helping me do this demo. So if you don't do hands-on work with clients, you can just put one hand on your heart like we started the training with, and one on your third chakra, your stomach area, and just do it on yourself and just kind of imagine receiving good energy of love, feeling any dysregulation along the way, any negative sensation, then melting into it like butter on the grill. So I'm going to play this video of my client session for you. Enjoy.
Down there, and just imagine receiving from your bigger essence and sending love to that young part of you that created safety by staying small. And so you don't ever want to ask that younger consciousness to have to heal itself. You want to help your client self-identify as the bigger essence, send love.
to that younger part. And if your client can't do that, you make sure that you're the secure attachment doing it and track the field if they can receive. So we're both. Yeah. And so her stomach's growling, which tells me the vagus nerve is balancing to more social engagement. The attachment system is healing. Yeah, she's receiving into it. Actually, 10 minutes went by. That was that blur. And the stomach again is making sounds. Again, when the stomach makes sounds, the vagus nerve is balancing. You're going from high dorsal tone to her breathing is parasympathetic through the lower body to high ventral tone. And so now just enjoy receiving the higher frequencies. White paint. And I'm going to fill you up. And you're helping fill yourself up too. So that's when a client can let me help them fill up and connect to their bigger essence as well as they're doing it for themselves. That's a high skilled client. So you just have to track whether you have to do it for them or if they can help you. My brilliant love. Look at that. It feels nice. So how would you describe the sensation of what the metaphorical black paint before it transformed to now? Before it felt really armored and like hard, and now it feels like it's kind of melting. Yeah, like butter on the grill. Yeah. So let's just stay here a little bit. And then I want you to self-identify as the sensation and emotion of that bigger essence coming in, your core being, the black paint transforming to white paint of your true essence. And again, full transformation happens when they can feel the emotion of the bliss or the joy or the higher frequency, as well as the sensation of the tingle and flow. And so you get to learn how to track to when they're full. So sometimes you have to end when they're only half full because they're not used to being that full, and you don't want them to go into defense because they feel really too good. So right now I'm just tracking when should we stop, because that's all she can eat right now, metaphorically. You don't want her stomach bloating because she ate too big of a pizza. And so she's getting to the point where she's, if she takes any more in, she could go to defense. So, yeah. You know what I'm saying. Yeah, so what would your takeaway be from this session?
I think receiving from myself.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
Like I think it's so hard, but actually it's not that hard.
Sweet. So you changed a negative belief and you found a way to really heal this deeper attachment system of giving to self. Mm-hmm. So you went from insecure to secure attachment with a couple skills. Cool. And then so what might your homework be? Practice. Yeah. That's how you get to Carnegie Hall. Right? Okay. Thank you. Blessings. Thank you. Blessings. So in summary, what you're doing is you're receiving that white paint and you're surrendering to melt any darker energy or lower vibrational energy or false self or negative emotions, and activating and balancing that vagus nerve. And fundamentally, I'm asking you to be kind to your human. You see the angels smoking and alcohol. And, you know, we are wholeness, and yet we're also human. And so as we learn to self-identify and create that secure attachment within ourselves, as defined by feeling the emotion and sensation of our true essence and helping our human, because he or she is going to make many mistakes. I certainly do. And yet, you know, those mistakes help self-regulate me back to the lessons I need to learn so I can incarnate more wholeness into this physical form. So how to take this work to the next level? Again, I'm going to first give you two options. Actually, there's three options. I have a weekend workshop coming the 16th, 17th, and 18th of November. It's only $97 if you sign up by midnight Monday before Tuesday. And that's at traumacoaches.com/weekend. It'll help you take this work to a deeper level, and it'll give you a taste of my coaching certification program, which starts December 7th. So if you go to traumacoaches.com, True Self Certification, that's discounted until Monday at midnight too. And if you're interested in either of those, just, you know, text or email me, Carolyn at mindenergybody.org. Carolyn at mindenergybody.org. Yeah, so I would love for you to join me in person. And again, the introductory workshop actually is free. If you join the certification training, you're refunded the cost of the workshop if you end up joining the December 7th coaching certification program. Yeah, traumacoaches.com/free video if you just want a free training. But yeah, come to the workshop, traumacoaches.com/workshop. I'd love to see you in person. This is a handout information on the actual certification training. It is a $300 discount if by Monday at midnight you sign up for the full thing. Yeah, register before October 28th. No, register by Monday. Yeah, I've extended it. And this is my healing center. If you haven't been here, it's my home and healing center. There's the grads from last class, because we all want peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work, but to keep that vagus nerve balance. It means to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart. I love that. So if you register for the weekend by Monday, I'll also give you a free session. Usually I charge $150 per session, but I'll give you 2 sessions for the price of $140. And as I said, if you join the workshop and decide to do the training, the workshop ends up being reimbursed on top of that. And if you can't come in person for anything and you only want to get certified online, I am for the first time offering a level 1 certification program that covers that 5-step skills and spiritual laws. Call it the secret code. It also includes 4 days in person in June. And it is being offered at a discount. It includes more than 40 vigils, more than 14 modules, research, personal awakening exercises, Facebook group, monthly calls starting February 15th, 4 days in person at the foothills of my less tutorial support and individualized discounted support. So how much is the online coaching level 1 certification? It is discounted. It's normally about $2,000, but now it's only about $1,500. So the way you sign up for the in-person coaching certification, again, has to be by Monday at midnight. traumacoaches.com/ should only be 1/, oops, certification level 1. traumacoaches.com, only 1/ certification level 1. 100% money back guarantee, as always. So how do you sign up for these? Well, if you want the in-person, if you want the online level 1 certification program for a huge discount, go to traumacoaches.com/certification level 1. You want to come for the in-person workshop, November 16 through 18, traumacoaches.com/workshop. And I'd love to have you join my year-long training once a month. It's 2.5 days a month, but the details are at traumacoaches.com/true self-certification. Discount before Tuesday. Always reach out to me with questions and comments. Sending you so much love and blessings. Always reach out to me. I look forward to supporting you in any way that feels right. You can do it, guys. That vagus nerve isn't so hard. Self-regulate back to your wholeness. Oh.